The short-run Phillips curve and the long-run Phillips curve at equilibrium are going to be a mirror image of aggregate supply and demand. So, whenever we start to draw a Phillips curve, what we're going to do is set up our graph, and then we'll begin with our labels. So on the vertical, you have inflation, which is just the same as price level on aggregate supply and demand, and you're going to have unemployment. Okay, so the short-run Phillips curve is actually downward sloping because it shows the inverse relationship of inflation and unemployment. So we get a trade-off. So when policymakers decide to do something to help with unemployment, they're going to cause inflation. So as unemployment decreases, inflation increases, and same thing with a contractionary policy. So the short-run Phillips curve is actually plotted points of the UK from several years from a guy named Bill Phillips. So anytime policymakers wanted to slow down inflation, it would cause unemployment. Okay, later on, we're going to get the long-run Phillips curve, and that's going to show us that in the long run, there's no trade-off between unemployment and inflation, and this exists at the natural rate of unemployment. So, whenever we have the SRPC, the short-run Phillips curve and the long-run Phillips curve at equilibrium, that means that we have an intersection and a certain level of inflation. Now, whenever we have equilibrium, it's going to be equilibrium the same way we have this kind of equilibrium. So when I have the short-run Phillips curve and the long-run crossing, we have equilibrium. And the same thing over here, where short-run supply, aggregate demand, and long-run supply all cross. So you can see the mirror image, price level to inflation, GDP to unemployment. Okay. Now, we have an economy with inflation and recession. We can set up our Phillips curve to mirror those as well. Okay. So what we're going to end up doing is, if we want to show an economy that has inflation, we'll have our long-run Phillips curve and our labels of inflation and unemployment. So now, if the short-run Phillips curve and long-run Phillips curve cross right here, that would be equilibrium. But that's not a point of price levels where we're operating. So if unemployment is this way, which would be low, and inflation is up that way, so if we want to show an economy with an inflationary gap, then we're going to put a point right there. So it's, if this is equilibrium, this price level would be above it. And if we're operating at this price level, that means unemployment must be pretty low. So that's how we would operate the short-run Phillips curve with inflation. So our inflationary gap would look like this, where they cross over to the right. Now, we can also set up a short-run Phillips curve in a recession by using the same kind of principle. Long-run Phillips curve forgot my label over here. Might as well add that back in. Alright, so now we have long-run Phillips curve and short-run Phillips curve in a recession. So remember, anytime we have a recession, we're operating at a point below full employment GDP or possible GDP output and a certain price level. Okay, so we want to show that the same kind of reflection. Now what we're going to do is we'll have the short-run Phillips curve. If we have a recession, we have unemployment. So that means we're operating at a higher level of unemployment at a certain level of price. And that gives us the long-run Phillips curve, short run, in a recession. Okay? Now, after all those things happen, what we're going to do is we're going to try and create any kind of changes to aggregate demand or short-run supply and reflect those on the Phillips curve. So if we have an aggregate demand change, that's going to create a movement along the curve. If we have a change in short-run supply, that's going to make a shift of the short-run Phillips curve. So a movement will stay on the line. A shift means we'll get a whole new one shifting right or left.